Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Well, this breaking news, we have Michael Bloomberg saying he is not going to enter the presidential race. And of course, he has flirted with this, saying that if his favorite, Hillary Clinton, did not get the Democrat nomination, that he would enter to save the world from Bernie and from Donald Trump. I guess when I look at this profession that he is not going to enter the race, a couple of James Bond titles come to mind describing this James Bond supervillain we call Michael Bloomberg. Never say never, and the world is not enough. And just keep that in mind because these guys can always jump in. He's a long ways off. And of course, Hillary can always be indicted. More on that later in the news broadcast. But when we look at what happened this last weekend, there was a lot of news, of course, not only a Democrat debate that we're going to be covering with Leanne McAdoo in the next segment, but there were also a lot of primaries this weekend. Let's take a look at what happened on the Republican side. This is an article from the New American. Does Super Saturday signal a change in the Republican race? And of course, in Kansas, Ted Cruz thumped Trump. A big victory for Ted Cruz. But is Kansas really much of a bellwether state? Remember that Kansas in 2012 picked Santorum. In 2008, they picked Huckabee. Neither of them, of course, went on to win the nomination. Very much like Iowa, both of those states were won by the same two people in both of those years, Huckabee and Santorum in 2008, 2012, respectively. What's going on in Kansas is that it is a closed primary. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but there may be something else that's going on, and this was brought up by the New American story. They look at Louisiana, for example. Now, in Louisiana, running up to the vote on Saturday, Trump took almost 47% of the before-election day vote. Only 23% for Cruz. Rubio had 20%. Kasich had just under 4%. But Cruz won a plurality of those who actually showed up on election day to vote by a very narrow margin. 40.9% for Cruz, 40.5% for Trump. And they ask, why did this happen? Well, it appears that Rubio's support imploded. It disappeared. And it looks like the bulk of it was picked up by Cruz. They say that Kasich picked up 4%, but Trump's totals declined by 6 percentage points and Cruz gained an amazing 18%. We've seen this happen many times before. When we get into a fight between two candidates, they both go down in the polls, and a third candidate will go up in the polls. And that appears to be what is happening with this nasty fight between Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. It is destroying Marco Rubio, but it is also hurting Donald Trump a little bit individually, but massively by people moving from Rubio to Cruz. Now, there's something else that's going on in this as well. Fox points out that Trump is doing better in the open primaries. Cruz is seeing more success in GOP-only contests. In other words, where you have to be registered as a Republican before you vote. They say if Trump indeed is being boosted by crossover voters, it suggests he's a stronger general election candidate than Democrats have given him credit for. And they have a quote from former chief of staff for the Cruz backer, Iowa Representative Steve King, says Trump has got crossover appeal. He's won a dozen contests, 7 of which were open to voters regardless of party affiliation, 2 of which have a hybrid system. He's won only 3 contests that were limited to registered Republicans, Nevada, Kentucky, and Louisiana, and those last 2 were the ones that happened on Saturday. They say that was very close. 5 of Cruz's 6 victories, however, came in closed or semi-closed contests. The only exception was his home state of Texas. They also point out, and this is a D.C.-based public affairs firm that has worked with a pro-Cruz super PAC. They say some of Trump's supporters are Reagan Democrats. Some of them are Perot independents. That, I believe, is why he can win in the general election. And Trump himself says, why can't the leaders of the Republican Party see that I am bringing in new voters by the millions? We're creating a larger, stronger party. That's what he tweeted after Super Tuesday. Well, of course, they do see that. But they would rather lose to Hillary Clinton or have Cruz, Kasich, or Rubio become the nominee. They would rather lose to any of those people than to have Trump in place. They don't want to win the election. What they want to win is the globalist trade treaties. He stands in their way with the globalist trade treaties. That's why they want him out. The rest of those people, the rest of the Republicans, as well as Hillary, support NAFTA, support TPP, support TTIP. They support the unconstitutional process to make those latter treaties operative. They say there may be another factor at play, though, and that may be the fact that Cruz is more highly organized. In other words, he can manipulate the process and the caucus better. You know, like telling people that Ben Carson has dropped out. That's what he did to win the Iowa caucus. They spread that rumor a half hour after the first tweet had gone out, along with a follow-up tweet immediately after that saying he's not dropping out. They waited 20 minutes until the caucuses started. Then they started spreading the rumors. That's why caucuses are fundamentally different than primary voting situations. They also point out in the Daily Mail that Trump plans to convert Democrats in order to sweep to general election victory. We all know this. We all know that he would take the fight directly to Hillary on corruption, that he would get the backing of what's called the Reagan Democrats as well as the pro-independents because of the economy issue, because of the trade issues. And that is one thing that you can count on Donald Trump. He's talked about this same issue in the same way for 35 years. They say it could reshuffle the battleground state maps in a way the country hasn't seen in decades, some experts predict. Working class white voters have been trending more and more Republican in the last few cycles, but Trump could grab even more away from Democrats in states like New Hampshire, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And I would add Michigan, which votes tomorrow. And of course, it's not just middle class, working class, blue collar, white voters. It's working class, blue collar voters who are losing their jobs to foreign countries of every race and color. They always like to make it about the race issue because that's the way they want to try to stop Donald Trump. Take a look at this story coming out of Youngstown, Ohio. Officials attribute 1,000 people switching from the Democrat Party to the Republican Party so they can vote for Donald Trump. This is from the county Republican chairman saying, we're seeing something this election cycle I've never seen before to this degree. Every day I take phone calls or I get voice messages from people saying they've been Democrats all their life. They've had it. They want to vote for Trump. I'm surprised at the volume of inquiries we're getting. It's remarkable. They say about 14% of those who voted Republican were previously Democrats. And here's another person, same county GOP chair, who says that he supports the Republican governor, Kasich, in Ohio, still says, we're seeing this all over the country. The Republican vote is way up, and it's because of Trump. Now it's happening in the Valley. Whatever you think of Trump, you can't take away his ability to energize the electorate. They say in Ohio, party affiliation is based solely on voting in a primary. So all you have to do is tell a poll worker you want to vote for a certain party in the primary, and that becomes your affiliation. Now, this is very important in Ohio, where Kasich hopes to win, to make his case for this. Now, look at this article that's on Infowars.com today. It's also on the Drudge Report. Ohio lost 112,500 jobs to trade with the countries that are part of the TPP. And of course, that is an analysis done by the Economic Policy Institute. This will soar if the TPP is enacted. Because what did we see when NAFTA was enacted? I showed the graph last week where you come up to the point where NAFTA is going. We have a trade surplus some years with Mexico, some years we had a deficit with them. But it was basically plus or minus $2 to $5 billion a year, the trade balance with Mexico. Some years we won, some years they won. As soon as NAFTA was passed, we had a trade deficit of $15 billion, a huge trade deficit. But that was the smallest deficit we've ever had since NAFTA was passed. In all the 23 years since then, we have had increasing trade deficits. We have $58 billion trade deficit this last year. We have lost $1 trillion in outflow of cash to Mexico and 1 million jobs. That's what NAFTA has done for us. And if we do the same thing with TPP, it will accelerate that. It will be NAFTA on steroids. And they point out that the lost jobs in Ohio represent 2.2% of all the employment in Ohio. And the institute that did this study says the new report quantifies what a mistake it was to leave our currency rules out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Understand that? There's no rules in there. There's no prohibitions to stop currency manipulation. What has Donald Trump continually talked about? He's talked about currency manipulation being a huge part of the problem with China. And of course, China would be part of the TPP. And everyone at the debate, from the moderators to the other candidates, their eyes just glaze over and they have absolutely no response to the idea that currency is being manipulated by China. The EPI says the trade deficit with TPP countries, attributable in large part to misaligned currency, costs America's working families 2 million jobs in 2015, more than half of those in manufacturing. By omitting currency rules from the TPP, it benefits Wall Street. It makes the TPP a tool for offshoring jobs, not for job creation. If Congress is waiting for more evidence that TPP is a bad deal, this is it. And I would suggest that when you got people like Hugh Hewitt, the moderator who tried to troll Donald Trump for the nuclear triad. Do you know what the nuclear triad is? And he didn't know that it was the three different ways that nuclear bombs will be delivered, because that's all they care about. Okay, what about the economic bombs that are being delivered to this country? Why don't we ask Hugh Hewitt if he knows what the China price is? Why don't some of the moderators ask if some of the other candidates know or even care what the China price is that is devastating this country? Now, of course, John Kasich, who is governor there in Ohio, where they've lost 112,000 jobs, 2.2% of the jobs in Ohio have been lost to these TPP countries. Of course, he said back in July, he was asked on Meet the Press by Chuck Todd. He said, well, there's you're a NAFTA guy. He says, that's a tough thing to be in Ohio now, isn't it? And the governor said, well, there's now some car companies that are talking about moving things to Mexico. They're citing NAFTA. I'm going to take a look into that. Yeah, you take a look into that. And when you figure it out, John Kasich, let us know. Meanwhile, there's somebody else that has figured this out. We have figured it out, and Donald Trump has figured it out. When we look at Ted Cruz, of course, he voted for the TPA before he voted against it. He's been on both sides of the fence when they didn't need him for the Trade Promotion Authority, which basically was set up to streamline the TPP without going through the constitutional process. You hear that, conservatives? You want to talk about Ted Cruz being your constitutionalist candidate? He says he's going to appoint judges that are constitutionalists, strict originalists, take it as it's written. Well, if they do, they would rule against his eligibility. But when we take a look at the trade issues, he didn't want to follow the Constitution's process for ratifying a treaty. That's what the TPA was about. He voted for the TPA, and then later he voted against it when they didn't need his vote and said, well, I'm not happy with the support for the Export-Import Bank. No, I'm not happy with the fact that Ted Cruz voted to take down our economy, and he did it by supporting unconstitutional means. Now, tomorrow we've got 150 more delegates that are up for grabs. We've got 19 in Hawaii, 32 in Idaho. Now, Hawaii is partially open. Idaho is closed. However, Mississippi and Michigan are open, and they have 40 and 59 respectively. Of course, they will be allocated proportionally still. Not until March 15 will there be any winner-take-all states. But in some of these states, there are conditions that if a candidate gets more than 50%, they will get all of the delegates. And that might happen in Michigan because there has been a tremendous amount of support for Donald Trump in Michigan. After the debate on Thursday night, he had a meeting in Michigan where there were auto workers there, and he told them that Mexico is becoming the new China. They said with about 2,000 to 3,000 people there. It was a raucous crowd, as it was characterized by the media. Now, Donald Trump ran away with the Nevada caucus. He got 46% of the vote in Nevada. Number two was Rubio with 24% of the vote. This is something that we have not covered before, but something that I do want to cover because I've spent so much time talking about in the last several days what is going on with the BLM, how out of control they are, how they're coming after not only the miners, the loggers, the ranchers, the people who are there using the lands recreationally, but now they are actually attacking the sheriffs, especially the sheriffs who try to defend the people there. Now, if you want to know why Donald Trump did so well in Nevada, I think it has something to do with an op-ed piece that he wrote back on the 26th of January that we've previously not talked about here at Infowars. I want to read you what Donald Trump said, because what he did was he called out the lawlessness of the BLM. And we have an article up talking about that particular op-ed piece at Infowars.com. He talked about the damages that does to the economy, the impediments to growth, but he also focused on the legal aspects of this. Listen to what he had to say. He said, the United States of America is a land of laws, and Americans value the rule of law above all. Why then has our Congress allowed the president and the executive branch to take on near dictatorial power? How is it that we have a president who will not enforce some laws, but who also encourages faceless, nameless bureaucrats who manage public lands as if the millions of acres were owned by agencies like the BLM and the Department of Energy? In Nevada, the lack of enforcement of immigration laws, the draconian rule of the BLM. This is Donald Trump talking about the draconian rule of the BLM. He says they're damaging the economy, lowering the standard of living, inhibiting natural economic growth. He goes on to say, the BLM controls over 85% of the land in Nevada. In rural areas, those who for decades have had access to public lands for ranching, mining, logging, and energy development are forced to deal with arbitrary and capricious rules that are influenced by special interests that profit from the D.C. rulemaking and who fill the campaign coffers of Washington politicians. That is powerful language. That is why Donald Trump won 46% of the vote in Nevada. He understands what's going on there. He says he could have stopped the situation with the BLM as well as what's going on in Oregon with the phone call. So could Obama. All right, stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about what else happened this weekend. We're going to talk about the Democrat debate. Leanne McAdoo will be joining us.
Fellow Infowars, I am very excited to be able to announce to you the introduction at InfowarsLife.com of a new way to save time and money when you stock up on Infowars Life formulations like Survival Shield X2 and Super Male Vitality. Just go to InfowarsLife.com today, select your favorite product, click on Auto Ship before adding to cart, and choose how often you want us to send you another order. Every time you choose Auto Ship at InfowarsLife.com, you get 10% off and you won't have to worry about running out and having to reorder next time. And of course, you can cancel with one click anytime. As you know, I'm all about the idea of a 360 win, and the new auto ship feature at InfowarsLife.com is a sure win for everybody. A win for liberty, a win for health, and a win when it comes to big savings. Visit InfowarsLife.com today and save 10% on your next Infowars Life order by selecting auto ship at checkout. That's InfowarsLife.com or call 888-253-3139.